My name's Sloane, 24, armed with a marketing degree, working a halfway decent job, and serving as the emotionally drained daughter of 2 Olympic-level guilt trippers. Until recently, I was also the family's unofficial babysitter, bill payer, and all-around emotional punching bag. This wasn't how life was supposed to go. After graduation, I moved back home thinking it would just be a short stopover. A few months to save up, get settled, maybe find a small downtown apartment with exposed brick and overpriced coffee I'd romanticize in my 20s. You know, the usual post-college dream. And honestly, it started out fine. Within 10 days of being back, I landed a job at a regional marketing firm. It wasn't glamorous by any means, but it paid steadily, offered remote work, and gave me the illusion that I was at least pretending to have adulthood somewhat under control. I should have known better, though. Normal doesn't last long in my family. Chaos is basically how we communicate love. It began subtly. My mom, Marlene, would say things like, "Sweetheart, could you cover the groceries this week? I'm drowning in credit card debt." Or, "We'll pay you back once your dad gets his tax refund." Spoiler alert, they never did. My dad, Curtis, was mentally retired long before he physically stopped working. He still clocked in at the local warehouse, but spent his nights glued to sports documentaries, ranting about how this generation doesn't know real struggle. Sure, Dad. Apparently my struggle was working 50 hours a week while single-handedly funding a household of 4 on an entry-level paycheck. But I kept quiet. Why? Because guilt ran through our house like oxygen. Invisible, constant, and necessary for survival. Then the real storm hit. One chilly evening in early March, I came home from work and nearly tripped over a Lightning McQueen suitcase in the hallway. I figured it belonged to one of my cousin's kids. Wrong. Out strolls my brother Xander, balancing his 3-year-old son Cassian on one hip and a Chick-fil-A bag in the other. Behind him comes Brielle, his long-term girlfriend and full-time energy vampire, scrolling on her phone without even glancing up. "We're back," Xander announced, like I was supposed to throw confetti. Like this was some happy family reunion, instead of a full-scale invasion. "Back from where?" I asked. He plopped the bag on the counter like he owned the place. "Brielle's lease ended. Her landlord's being a jerk. We just need to crash here for a bit." That phrase, "crash here for a bit," in my family means forever. Rent-free. And guess who handles it all? Me. Right on cue, Mom entered the scene, all teary-eyed and dramatic. "My babies!" she cried, hugging Brielle like a returning war hero, kissing Cassian on the forehead, then turning toward me with that tight, performative smile she uses when she's about to manipulate me. "It's just temporary," she said. "They're going through a rough patch." So was I, but no one seemed interested in asking how I was doing. By the next morning, Cassian's toys had colonized every inch of the living room. My bedroom, the only peaceful place I had, suddenly became his nap zone, because he sleeps better away from Xander's snoring. Brielle claimed the guest room, and Xander sprawled across the couch like a dying king, insisting his back hurt from their old mattress. Overnight, my space, my time, and my energy stopped belonging to me. Everything became negotiable, mine to give, theirs to take. And the worst part? No one even asked. Babysitting wasn't requested. It was assigned. Paying for Cassian's daycare snacks, or driving him to the pediatrician when Brielle had a migraine? Automatically my job, because that's how my family operates. Assumption over communication. One Saturday, I came downstairs in leggings and a hoodie, hoping for one quiet day, only to have a diaper bag shoved into my hands and a full itinerary recited like I was a nanny. "Wait," I said. "Where are you going?" "Brunch with the girls," Brielle chirped. "You'll be fine. He's mostly potty trained now." Mostly. Great. I wanted to scream, but instead I just stood there while Cassian hurled a sippy cup at my foot and yelled, "Paw Patrol!" Xander walked past, clapped me on the shoulder, and said, "Thanks, sis, you're the best." I wasn't. I was a doormat. A tired, frustrated, overly accommodating doormat with cracked cuticles and an empty savings account. That night, I texted my friend Elodie. "Remind me why I moved home again?" She replied, "Because you thought your family would treat you like family." You were wrong. That message hit like a punch to the chest. She was right. I had been wrong. And something small, sharp, and defiant in me started to wake up. A week later, I got home from work and found Brielle sitting in the kitchen, scrolling through her phone while Cassian was finger painting directly on the refrigerator. Not on paper. On the fridge. "Hey," I said as I dropped my bag by the door. "Where's Mom?" Brielle didn't even bother to glance up from her phone. "Hair appointment," she said flatly. "Dinner's in the oven." "Oh, and Xander needs you to watch Cassian tomorrow." I blinked. "What?" "Just for a few hours," she replied, still scrolling. "We've got a thing." I didn't ask what thing meant. I already knew it'd be something ridiculous, like test driving a car they couldn't afford, or running errands that suspiciously ended with bottomless mimosas. Still, I bit my tongue. I told myself it wasn't worth another argument, but inside, I could feel something starting to fracture, like a dam that's been holding back too much pressure for too long. And that dam finally broke the night I overheard the conversation. I swear I wasn't snooping. Okay, maybe I lingered in the hallway longer than necessary, but when you hear your name come up, and your family still hasn't mastered the concept of indoor voices, you listen. Brielle's voice floated out first. "I still can't believe your mom offered to pay for the cruise," Xander laughed. "Yeah, she said it was our reward for surviving such a stressful year." Brielle giggled. "Well, we deserve it. And hey, we don't even have to bring Cassian." And then my mom chimed in, laughing like it was the funniest thing she'd ever heard. "Of course not. Sloane will stay with him. It'll be good for her. She needs to get used to it anyway." "Used to what exactly?" Sacrificing my entire life for everyone else's comfort? They were planning a 7-day Caribbean cruise. 7 whole days, and guess who wasn't invited? Me. Guess who they decided would just stay behind to babysit a 3-year-old without even being asked? Also me. Not even a, "Hey Sloan, are you free that week?" Just a done deal, made without me, as if I were some live-in maid without a schedule, without plans, and definitely without the right to say no. And that's when I finally snapped. But here's the thing. I didn't yell. I didn't throw a fit or slam a door. I smiled. I nodded. I even offered to print out their boarding passes. Then I quietly started making my own plans. See, for months I'd been transferring bits of my paycheck into a little someday savings account, something I started back in college when therapy was too expensive, and saving money felt like emotional insurance. That account wasn't huge, but it was enough. Enough to give me a way out. I found a tiny studio apartment across town. Nothing fancy, just clean, quiet, and mine. I set the move-in date for the same weekend they'd be sailing off into paradise. But the real satisfaction? That came afterward. For months, the electric, internet, and water bills had all been under my name, because, in Mom's words, "You're better with tech stuff, Sloan." So I canceled them. Every single one. Right before they left, I also logged into our so-called joint emergency savings account, the one I'd been contributing to while they couldn't pitch in right now, and emptied it. Completely legal, by the way. It was my account. They just happened to have access. Whoops. Then, just for good measure, I made an anonymous call to the landlord to report an unregistered sublease. And I sent a very polite, detailed email to CPS about a household with an unstable couple, inconsistent supervision, and a toddler often left with non-guardians. Too far? Maybe. But if they were going to treat me like the hired help, they should have remembered one important thing. The help always knows where the fuse box is. Saturday morning came. They loaded their luggage into Dad's borrowed SUV, kissed Cassian goodbye like they were leaving for a deployment, and sped down the street. Xander even shouted from the window, "Try to get him to nap at noon. He's a mess without his schedule." Sure thing, big brother. He'd be an even bigger mess when CPS showed up wondering why there was no adult in the house, because I wasn't staying. That night, while the world was still asleep, I packed my car. Just me, my laptop, my plants, and whatever was left of my dignity. By 5:15 a.m., I was gone. No note, no explanation. Just a silent house and a toddler who was never my responsibility to begin with. And before you ask, yes, I made sure he was safe. I dropped Cassian off at his maternal grandmother's house on my way out of town. She'd offered to help more than once. Now she finally could. By the time my family docked in the Bahamas, the power was out, the fridge had spoiled, the rent was late, and their phones were blowing up with calls from utility companies, CPS, and a very angry landlord. Meanwhile, I was sitting in my own apartment sipping iced coffee. No toys scattered on the floor, no screaming toddlers, no Brielle, no Xander. Just peace. Glorious, guilt-free peace. And that, as it turned out, was only the beginning. They came back on a Thursday. I wasn't there, obviously, but I got front row seats through voicemail. The first message was from Mom, her voice high, frantic, and almost shrill. "Sloan, where are you?" Mom's voice screeched through the voicemail. "The power's out, the fridge is spoiled, and there's a notice from the landlord on the door. Call me back right now." Then, a few hours later, came Xander, slurring his words, half drunk on rum punch and his own entitlement. "You think this is funny? You left us, Sloan. You left us to deal with your mess." Right. My mess. The irony was almost poetic. Brielle followed up with a 3-paragraph text that read like a bad soap opera monologue. Something about how I'd traumatized Cassian because his safe space was gone, and how I was a heartless psychopath who wouldn't understand because I don't have kids. The hypocrisy nearly gave me whiplash, so I ignored them. All of them. I muted notifications, poured myself a glass of wine, and turned on my favorite trashy reality show, the kind where adults throw drinks at each other instead of emotional grenades. For the first time in years, I sat in a clean apartment where no one screamed about whose turn it was with the iPad, but peace in my family never lasts long. 3 days later, there was a knock at my door. Not a gentle one either, a bang, bang, bang that rattled my Sunday morning. It was 7:48 a.m. I opened the door, still half asleep, wearing pajamas and holding a cup of coffee. 2 uniformed officers stood outside. "Ms. Sloan Price?" one asked. I blinked. Yeah?" "We're responding to a welfare concern filed by Marlene and Xander Price," the taller one said. "They claimed you may have abandoned a minor in your care." I laughed. Out loud. Not the happy kind. The hollow, exhausted kind that only comes from years of being gaslit by the same 2 people who now had the audacity to weaponize CPS against me. "I didn't abandon anyone," I said calmly. Then I handed them a folder, copies of Cassian's daycare release forms, plus the address and phone number of his maternal grandmother, who legally had guardianship. The officers double-checked everything, asked a few polite questions, and eventually one of them sighed. "We're really sorry, ma'am. This actually happens more often than you'd think." I smiled thinly. "It really shouldn't." They apologized again and left. I thought maybe that would be the end of it. It wasn't. The very next day my manager called. His tone was uneasy, too polite, too careful. He said he'd received an anonymous email claiming I had a history of neglect and mental instability, that I was unreliable and prone to sudden absences. I didn't even have to guess who sent it. My family was trying to destroy me, not because I'd done anything wrong, but because they couldn't control me anymore, because I finally had the audacity to say no, and mean it. But here's the thing. I didn't cry. I didn't spiral. Instead, I documented everything. Every voicemail, every text, every email, all saved, timestamped, and organized into folders. I even recorded the conversation with the officers, with their consent. Then I made a call to Roxanne, my friend Elodie's older sister. She's an attorney who lives for messy family disputes and once made her own uncle cry during a deposition. After reviewing my evidence, she looked up from her laptop and said 6 words that made my spine straighten. You have a case for harassment. By the end of that week, cease and desist letters were drafted and sent. 1 to Xander, 1 to Brielle, and 1 to Mom. All by certified mail, because I wanted signatures. I wanted them to feel it. That night, I finally answered one of Xander's 30 missed calls. Not because I owed him a response, but because I wanted to hear the panic in his voice. Sloan, you've gone too far, he said, breathing hard. I sipped my tea. No, Xander. I've gone just far enough. You're trying to ruin us, he snapped. You ruined yourselves, I said evenly. I just stopped cleaning up after you. He went silent for a moment before delivering his final line. You're dead to us. You know that? I smiled. Then stop calling me. And I hung up. After that, nothing. No calls from Mom. No texts from Brielle. No knocks on my door. Just silence. Beautiful, eerie silence. For the first time in my adult life, I felt the air in my lungs belong only to me. I started decorating my apartment. Real curtains, art I actually liked, a bookshelf because I finally had time to read again. I met up with friends. I went hiking. I laughed without having to check over my shoulder. And then, 2 weeks later, a letter arrived. It was from Dad. Handwritten. Short. The penmanship was shaky. Sloan, I don't know exactly what's going on, but I know you didn't deserve how this turned out. I should have said something sooner. I'm sorry I didn't protect you. Dad. It didn't fix everything, but it cracked something open. He had seen it all. Watched from the sidelines. Chose silence. And now, he regretted it. Good. Let him sit with it. Let all of them sit with it. Because for once, they finally had to live in the house they built, and I wasn't going to be the one paying for the repairs anymore. It's been 3 months since I nuked my old life. No more Sunday brunches. No more, can you just spot me till Friday? Texts. No babysitting requests disguised as family bonding. No guilt trips. No emotional landmines waiting around every corner. Just quiet. And for the first few weeks, that quiet felt strange, almost like withdrawal. You don't realize how addicted you are to dysfunction until it stops showing up on your doorstep. I started waking up without that familiar dread in my chest. I started saying yes again, to trivia nights, to yoga, to after-work drinks, to spontaneous beach drives with Elodie where we blasted 2000s emo like it was sacred scripture. I started existing for me. And then came the wedding. No, not mine. God, no. Xander and Brielle's. Because apparently after the cruise disaster, the CPS incident, and the cease and desist letters, they still decided it was the perfect time to throw a backyard Love Conquers All Instagram-themed pity party. My invitation arrived in the mail, printed on shiny rose gold cardstock, complete with a handwritten note in Brielle's loopy cursive. We'd love to have you. Let's put the past behind us, for Cassian's sake. Cassian. Of course, they always led with the kid. I stared at that RSVP card for 2 whole minutes before bursting out laughing so hard I nearly spilled my coffee. Put the past behind us? Behind who, exactly? Because from where I stood, they were the ones still dragging it around like a carry-on bag they refused to check. I didn't RSVP. Instead, I sent them a gift. A plain white envelope. No note. No card. Just one folded piece of paper inside. A printed copy of the CPS report I'd filed. Redacted. My name blacked out, but unmistakably theirs. Highlighted in yellow were the phrases, child left under assumption of informal guardianship. Parents failed to confirm arrangements. Caller expressed concern over chronic misuse of familial support. Elodie later told me that Brielle burst into tears when she opened it, and Xander punched a fence post. Good. Consider that my RSVP. On their wedding day, I booked myself a massage, then took myself out to dinner. Alone. No kids' menu. No one asking me to cut grapes in half. Just me, a glass of red wine, and a perfectly cooked steak I didn't have to share. While they danced under string lights, pretending to be the stars of some heartfelt redemption arc, I finally felt like the main character in my own story. And I know how these stories usually end. This is the part where people expect me to say, but deep down, they're still my family, and maybe one day we'll heal. No, stop waiting for that twist. I'm not interested in healing something that only hurts when I'm the one doing all the work. I'm not here to fix people who watched me drown and asked why I wasn't waving back. They don't get access to me anymore, not until they actually apologize. And I don't mean with flowers, cake, or sad little looks. I mean with action, with effort, with receipts. And I'm not holding my breath for that. I've moved on. Last week, I signed a lease for a better apartment, one with real sunlight, hardwood floors that don't creak like old grudges, and enough space to finally breathe. I got promoted at work. My manager even told me he admired how I handled all that personal drama with grace and boundaries. I didn't correct him. I just smiled. I also reconnected with Aunt Vivian, Mom's estranged sister who'd been exiled years ago for supposedly being selfish. Her crime? Saying no to babysitting Xander's newborn while she was starting law school? Sound familiar? Turns out generational cycles are real, and sometimes the only way to break them is by becoming the villain in someone else's story. I'm okay with that. Let them call me selfish. Let them call me dramatic. Let them call me cold. Because if selfish means I'm no longer bankrupting myself emotionally and financially for people who wouldn't cross a room for me, then hell yes, I'm selfish. If dramatic means I refuse to let abuse hide under the excuse of family tradition, fine, I'll write the damn screenplay. And if cold means I'd rather be alone and at peace than surrounded and resentful, then hand me a sweater, baby. I used to think being the good daughter would earn me something. Maybe a seat at the table, a badge of respect, or just a thank you. But that seat was never mine. It was reserved for whoever kept the family comfortable. I'm done with that. Let them find a new martyr. Let them twist themselves into apologies I never asked for. Me? I'm busy. I'm building something that belongs to me. And no, I don't regret leaving. The only thing I regret is waiting so damn long to realize I was never obligated to stay.